Hello and welcome to this edition of Bayou Time. I'm your host, Keith Whiteside, licensed clinical social worker with Travel and Home Care, and we appreciate you joining us today. You know, we love to get updates and information from those people who are out there making the decisions, helping us figure out where we're going, what we're doing, and what's best for our state. We welcome back to the program Congressman Garret Graves. Garret, thanks for joining us today.
Hey, thanks, Keith. Great to be back with you again.
We appreciate it. Look, we all deal with changes. We all deal with personnel. Let's talk a little bit about the new governor that's come in, and I'm sure that's going really well for you guys.
Look, we're excited to get a new governor, to get fresh leadership, to get, I think, a new direction for the state. It's going to be really important that we're all working together. You know, Keith, the way I look at it is you have your local government leaders, your parish council, parish president, sheriff, and others. You have all of your state legislators, and the Bayou region's got a great group of state representatives and state senators, and then you have your federal congressional delegation. And the reality is that all three levels of government have to work together. And I think that the governor is kind of like the quarterback of the team. As the quarterback is the one who kind of calls the plays and helps to, kind of lead or guide the team. But we all have to be working as a team. And so, that relationship is going to be really important for all levels of government if we're going to be successful. So we're excited about it and looking forward to working with Governor Landry and working on his priorities and trying to continue some of the important priorities that we've been working on for a number of years as well.
Yeah, and look, the only way to be able to do that is sometimes to overcome some of the conflicts and where we see we need to change things or things that we really need to fight for. Let's talk a little bit about this bill that seems to be moving forward.
Yeah, so, it's amazing and something that I know Governor Landry is going to be very supportive of. But you look at what's happening with energy right now, Keith, and I mean, look, whether you just simply put gas in your car, we're paying 40% more across the country for energy right now. And, one of the things that's so frustrating is right off the coast of Louisiana, we have some of the best, some of the most readily available energy in the world. And we're being blocked or prevented from producing it. I mean, it doesn't even make sense. So what you've seen under this administration, I want to remind you, when Biden took office, gasoline prices in Louisiana were as low as $1.74 a gallon, $1.74. And look at where they are now. And they're blocking energy off the coast of Louisiana. They're preventing us from being able to produce more energy. So we have a bill that just moved through the House Natural Resources Committee last week that forces the White House to resume new energy production in the Gulf of Mexico to where we can have robust, readily available energy right from Louisiana instead of becoming increasingly dependent upon foreign energy sources. It's good because if you get more supply of energy, then you get that balance of supply and demand, prices come down. It's good because we actually have some of the cleanest or lowest emissions from energy in the world in our Gulf of Mexico. And the other is that it's about energy security. It's about us not being dependent upon countries like Iran or Venezuela or Russia or others for energy sources. China, we're getting renewable energy sources from China. It just doesn't make sense when you have these readily available sources right off the coast of our state. And so really excited that legislation has now moved through the committee, and we're going to try and get it on the House floor and pass through the full House as quickly as possible.
It's also so much cheaper because it's right here in our backyard. We're not having to pay for all of the expenses to get it to where we need it for us in Louisiana and in South Louisiana. It's right here. It's literally in our backyard.
Keith, I have never seen anything so incomprehensible as this administration's energy policy. I mean, this just takes an ounce of common sense to realize what the right thing to do is. And the fact that we've got to actually draft a bill that says produce American energy instead of getting it from Iran or getting it from Venezuela, it is mind-boggling. We have to do this. Let me throw out a few numbers. Okay. As a result of the Biden administration's energy policies that are restricting new energy production, the Iran, the country that's funding the terrorist group Hamas, that's funding the terrorists in the Houthis in Yemen that just shot down our Reaper drone, the country that's funding Hezbollah, that's shooting rockets into Israel, the funding Islamic Jihad, Jenin Brigade, all of these terrorist groups. Iran, as a result of U.S. energy policy, has profited $60 billion in new or additional profits since Biden took office. I mean, these policies aren't just harmful to Americans directly like that, but it's actually further empowering Iran and the terrorist proxies that they fund in Israel, in Yemen, in Lebanon, and other countries, destabilizing and attacking our allies. I mean, this is just crazy what's going on right now.
And so it's very interesting when you look at those kinds of numbers, when you look at what the increase in those abilities for those countries to make money, it actually allows us to fund some of these very inappropriate activities and behaviors that they invest in, right? So we're funding that.
And we're funding that. And then keep in mind, just 2 weeks ago, we passed a bill to spend $14 billion in U.S. taxpayer funds to send it over to help Israel. I mean, so it's not just about the fact that we're harming Americans, we're charging higher prices, but it's also the fact that it's causing us to have to spend more money. So it's kind of like this. You can either let Iran profit from it and fund the terrorists, or you can produce energy off the coast of Louisiana, and we can get the revenue sharing for coastal restoration, hurricane protection, and flood control. Which one of those makes more sense?
Yeah, exactly. Well, speaking of making sense, we have to take a quick break. We appreciate your time as always. We'll take a short break, come right back and spend more time with Congressman Garret Graves when we return right here on Bayou Time.
Today's social media segment is brought to you by Terrebonne General Health Systems, modern technology, and timeless caring. Rouse's, you're either local or you're not. Buick, the craft of modern luxury. St. Martin and Bork, know your rights.
Hello and welcome back to this edition of Bayou Time. Again, your host, Keith Whiteside, licensed clinical social worker. Thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it. As we welcome back into the show, Congressman Garret Graves. Garret, thanks again for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Keith.
Yeah. And, one of those things that I think people either don't know or they don't realize is that how these monies are spent and what we're doing and maybe the spending that we have maybe in other places when we're not really turning around and focused on what we need here.
Yeah, look, there is going to be a reckoning for the budget, for the debt of the United States coming. And whether it happens in 2 years or 20 years, I can't say right now. But Keith, I want to put things in perspective. For every $1 that we borrow as a nation over the next 10 years, 50 cents of it is going to have to go to just paying the interest on the debt. I mean, think about that. If you were a business, you would have folded years and years ago. This is an unsustainable trajectory. And so you're exactly right. We've got to scrutinize every dollar that we're spending. And whether it's do we build a new bridge in Houma, or do we go invest in helping the defense of Israel? I mean, we've got to scrutinize every single dollar. And so the fact that we're spending so much money on foreign aid, you really got to think about that. Is this the right thing? And in the case of Israel, important ally, we cannot allow the Middle East stability to be undermined and for this to grow into these other Middle Eastern countries like Lebanon, like growing further into the chaos in Syria and Iran, because that ends up becoming a bigger problem for the United States. And it's a similar situation in Ukraine. Look, the Biden administration just came in and asked for $106 billion for Israel, for Ukraine, for Taiwan, and a small group of other cats and dogs, but $106 billion. I mean, that's more than the entire coastal master plan for Louisiana.
Right.
And we can't allow these blank checks to be written to other countries. And so we're pushing back and saying, no, we're not just going to give you all this money. Tell us what it's for. Tell us what your your vision is, what your objectives are, how this is going to advance. And the White House at this point is saying, oh, no, we've got it. We're not going to share that information with you. So we're saying, well, we're not going to give you a penny then. And so, in these tight budgetary times, but really any time, you've got to scrutinize the money, and you've got to be really thoughtful about the fact that these are American taxpayer dollars. And that's where we need to be focusing our priorities and investments now. In Ukraine, if we let this get out of hand and Russia goes in and attacks Poland or Estonia or Latvia or Germany, one of these other countries, that becomes a NATO problem. And we certainly don't want to get in a situation where we have American men and women, boots on the ground, in war over there. So I think that whatever we can do to protect democracy and nip it in the bud's important, but certainly not a blank check.
Yeah, and you bring up such a great point. If we're spending $1.50 for every dollar that we have to use and spend to borrow, then what is it that we're doing to ourselves by how we're trying to help when you say write a blank check? And so it just, even in my house, between me and just my wife, neither of us write a blank check. There's got to be some check and balance to that. And so we've got to be able to look at that and see, you got to give us a little transparency about what you're doing. And that way we can hold you accountable to spending the money where you say you're going to.
Yeah, Keith, it's all about priorities, right? I mean, you may want a Ferrari, but you look at your bank account, you're like, well, I can't afford one, so I'm sticking with a Ford.
Right.
You got that reality check and priorities. And so, it's all about prioritization, and you got to determine what are our objectives, where am I held accountable, or what am I held accountable to? And look, South Louisiana is number 1, 2, and 3. And so that's where you got to focus your priorities and objectives. And yes, it is important for us to have relations and protect democracies and keep areas stable like our strong allies in Israel. But you certainly have to ensure that you're first striking the right priorities. Are we funding the Morganza project? Are we funding Highway 90 upgrade into an interstate and things along those lines? We're getting LA1 built all the way from Foucha on up to Highway 90. And so you really have to focus on priorities because what we're doing right now as a government, what it's doing to our children, to our grandchildren, some of the most irresponsible and reckless spending, it's not okay. And we've got to get that under control.
Well, and speaking of, we also need to be able to see that you're not trying to slide in other things to try and cover or try to prevent what you want, like the situation with the whales.
Yeah. Oh, goodness. So, I'm glad you brought that up, Keith. So there's this new species of whale that were discovered in the Gulf of Mexico a few years ago, and they're called the Rice's whale. And previously, for those, mammal nerds out there, previously it was called the Brutus whale.
Right.
They thought it was the Brutus whale, but they found it was a new species. So all of a sudden, the Biden administration gets together these radical environmental groups. They try to put restrictions on 11 million acres from Florida all the way across Texas, of course, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Texas, all the way down to Mexico. 11 million acres trying to put restrictions like saying boats couldn't go faster than 10 knots and all these other restrictions on energy production. But we had a bill that we just moved through the committee yesterday. The fact that we even have to do a bill for this that says that they can't put all these restrictions in place. You have to protect just where the whale habitat is, not all these other areas. So we're excited we're able to move that forward, but frustrated we have to.
Yeah, and it's just some of those little caveats that you've got to pay a great attention to, much like you said about the budget. We've got to pay great attention to what other things that people are trying to do to prevent and really slide in some ulterior motive or underlying agenda that they're trying to do, or hidden agenda. And so one of those things that we're always careful about is being able to look at that and say, no, wait a minute, let's make sense out of this first before we do it. Speaking of making sense, we got to take another short break. I know they fly by. We so much appreciate your time. We'll do this one more time if that's all right. We'll come back with you.
Great. Love
all
it.
right. We appreciate it. All right, guys. Garret Graves is going to stick around. You do the same. We'll be right back right here on Bayou Time.
Today's social media segment is brought to you by South Louisiana Bank. It's better when we bank together. Waits and Downer, attorneys at law. Terrebonne Ford, built Ford tough.
Hello and welcome back to this edition of Bayou Time. Again, your host, Keith Whiteside, licensed clinical social worker. We thank you so much for joining us here as we welcome back into the program Congressman Garret Graves. Garret, thanks again for joining us and sticking with us. We know how busy you are.
But
Yeah. And one of those things that is special to us. It's one of those things that we think about. I'm so very glad that Martin and everybody here is so very focused on really looking back and appreciating what people have done for us and how we've gotten here. We can't really do that without thinking about and thanking our veterans for what they've done as we approach Veterans Day here this week.
Keith, in this job, I've had the chance to travel to other countries, and all that's done is reinforce my belief that America, while imperfect, is the greatest country in the world, how blessed we are to be able to grow up, to raise a family in America, but certainly in South Louisiana. Look, I got to remind you, there are countries where you are not allowed to worship your God. There are countries where women are not allowed to be educated. They're not allowed to drive. They're not allowed to show their face. There are countries where you go to jail or maybe even get killed, executed for criticizing your government. There's no such thing as free speech, free media. And so the blessings we have in the United States, we were born and raised in it. I think we often take it for granted. And here we have Veterans Day, and it is so important that we remember how we were able to be the greatest country in the world, how we were able to develop, define, and protect these unique freedoms that we have in the United States. And it is 100% about our veterans. Those, of course, who served in world wars, those who went and promoted freedom and democracy in the Korean War and Vietnam War, and of course, all of these battles, Desert Storm and others in the Middle East. Critical folks that literally put it all on the line. So thank a veteran, thank a veteran's family, because I'm telling you, we don't want to be anything like Cuba. We don't want to be anything like China, Venezuela, all of these countries that just where people don't have freedom. Think about North Korea. You're not even allowed to have free thought. And so we're so blessed, and we owe it all to our veterans and their families.
Yeah, we really do. And it's one of those things where our veterans are still in need. And it's one of those things that I know that you and your administration has really thought about and focused on and trying to make sure that we're actually looking at what it is that we're doing for our veterans. What are we doing for our wounded warriors? What are we doing for those people? I know we're very focused on that down here, but you guys really stay very focused on what we need to do to make sure that we're honoring and taking care of them.
We do spend a lot of time doing it because, look, if you have to wait to thank a veteran when you need them, it's too late. And so what we do is we have been working, first of all, I'll talk about our current military service members working. We passed a bill through the House several weeks ago that increases their pay by about 5.4%. Increases, gives them higher pay because that's what they deserve, provides better benefits to them. But our actual veterans, look, it's no secret that the VA, the Veterans Affairs, has been disastrous in the past in terms of the care they provided, the lack of responsiveness they provided to veterans. And so we worked and were able to pass the VA Mission Act, holding the VA employees accountable for providing the right service, for being responsive to our veterans. We actually recently got language passed that's going to create a new consolidated veterans clinic in South Louisiana and be able to bring all the services together to where you don't have to travel as far to get access to things like medical, dental, vision, but also mental health and other services that are so critically important to our veterans. Ensuring that those that were exposed to toxic air through burn pits in the Middle East and other challenges that resulted in health effects, that there's no question that those are going to be government funded medical care for our veterans. So we have been able to get some huge wins over recent years for our veterans and making sure, as I said at the beginning, that we're not thanking our veterans when we need them, but we're thanking them right now for all that they've done, all that they're doing, the service that they provided to our country, and those that their dependents, the sacrifice that their dependents have made as well.
Well, I can tell you firsthand, I've got a family member, and it happens to be my other father-in-law. And so he's happens to be just my wife's ex-father-in-law, but they've been such a huge impact in our family and really teaching us and all of us learning. And we're so very glad that we now have my other father-in-law in a place where they are really caring for him well. So I want you to know that that care is changing. I want you to know that even though we've had some challenges there, we're improving with that. So I know that firsthand here in the last few days as I got a chance to see that and see these veterans. You know, you want to go thank a veteran, do that in a veteran's home where everyone there is a veteran. It's moving to be able to see these people and the fact that they're being cared for in a good way.
It really is awesome that we have those facilities, and if veterans want to be with other veterans, where they can go into these veterans' homes, they have unique stories, unique lives, and it's great that we have those facilities for them to be able to come together. But most importantly, preserving those memories so where we don't ever take for granted the freedoms and blessings that we have in South Louisiana, that we have in the United States of America. It's important that we thank veterans and that we remember how we were able to become the greatest country in the world.
Yeah, and we need to be able to continue that. The best way to do that is with great leadership. And so we appreciate you coming on to share with us exactly what you see happening, some of the things that you're fighting for. And I always love the fact that we get to really kind of stand behind and see what it is that you guys are doing and what you're fighting for and some of the bills as they move forward. We always appreciate the updates and being able to get that and be able to share that with our communities here down in South Louisiana about the fight that you're fighting here and in the Capitol. So we appreciate your time and sharing that with us today.
Hey, Keith, great being with you again, and love to do it anytime.
We appreciate it. Look forward to our next time. We appreciate it. Have a wonderful Veterans Day.
You too. See you.
Thank you so much. All right, guys, that'll do it for this particular segment of Bayou Time. Don't go anywhere. A whole lot more right here on HTV.